Brian didn't have the best relationship with his family. His parents had hoped he'd take over the family store when he became an adult, but he wanted to do more with his life than sell knockoff products to cheap old people in an aging town for the rest of his days. He left his little hometown as soon as he turned 18 to go to college and didn't look back for the entire 4 years it took him to finish his education. Now at age 20, he had a degree and a stable job, but no one to congratulate him about it. Whether it was because of the holiday spirit finally seeping in or just pure loneliness, Brian couldn't be sure, but he decided on a whim that he'd celebrate his first Thanksgiving in 4 years with the family he left. He tried to contact them first, but was met with no response when he called them with the numbers he had blocked for 4 years. Not all that was surprising, really. A lot can change in 4 years. They must have all changed their phones and contacts during that time. If he wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving with them, he would have to drop by unannounced. But before he returned to his childhood home, he went to buy 4 boxes of the fanciest chocolates he could find to add to the Thanksgiving feast his family must have been having and to act as a peace offering for the way he left them. Brian's mind raced towards a million different outcomes during the long drive back to his old hometown, accompanied only by the cheesy Thanksgiving-themed songs on his radio. Would his parents be happy to see him again, or would they be pissed off that he dared to show his face again? What about his little brother Jim or his older sister Annie? For better or worse, he reached his destination before he could decide to back down. Standing in front of that door felt like staring into the abyss, waiting for it to blink back. A growing sense of dread kept him from knocking on the door and summoning his estranged parents back into his life. He would have turned back and driven far, far away had his mother not opened the door first. Instead of the angry scowl he was afraid he'd find on her face, she smiled at him as warmly as ever. Not knowing what to say, he blurted out the first thing that came to mind, "Hey, Mom. Welcome home, dear." There was no malice or resentment in her voice, not even a little bit. She sounded like she was just welcoming him home the way she always did after he had a long day at school. She led him into his childhood home, and Brian followed her while fighting the tears welling up in his eyes. The dining table was already set, a massive turkey at the center of the table surrounded by mashed potatoes, cornbread, cranberry sauce, and half a dozen other traditional Thanksgiving dishes. His father, younger brother, and older sister were already seated at the table with clean plates. They were all smiling calmly as if they'd expected him to return. There was even an empty 5th seat already set up at the table with the necessary plate and utensils for a feast. Jim ran up to him and hugged him tight. Jim had been 7 when Brian left, so he should have been 11 now, and yet his little brother didn't look a single day older than he did the day he left. "Welcome back home, Pete. Took you long enough. Come on, let's eat." The next 2 hours were the most blissful time in his life. None of his family seemed to resent him for leaving. They just brushed off the whole 4 years he spent avoiding them in favor of idle talk that made all the tension he felt before melt away. After stuffing their faces with turkey and mashed potatoes, the newly reunited family put some food on plates to eat in front of the living room television. Brian sat on the single sofa seat with a turkey leg and a wing on his plate while the rest of the family laid back on the long couch. Back when he was little, before internet streaming became a thing, he'd spent countless hours in front of that same television watching whatever came on with his family. Now he was finally doing it again, though he couldn't help but feel like something was off. The annual Thanksgiving football game started playing on the TV, and Brian finally figured out what was wrong after the first few minutes of watching it. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, son. Isn't this the same football game that was playing 2 years ago? I could have sworn I've seen this before." "Nonsense, it's live right now. You must be imagining things. I guess. Brian was certain that he'd seen the game before, but didn't want to press the matter any further for fear of upsetting his father. It was a miracle they weren't angry with him when he suddenly showed up unannounced, and he didn't feel like pushing his luck too much. The grandfather clock that stood in the living room chimed with each passing hour. Brian could feel himself becoming more and more uneasy as time went on. The football game on the TV played out the exact same way he remembered it from 2 years ago. About halfway into the game, Brian caught a worrying scent in the air that nobody else seemed to notice. "Hey, Mom." "Yes." "Dear, did you turn the stove off? I think I smell a gas leak." "Oh, don't worry about it. I've checked. It's probably just your imagination, or maybe your brother had too many beans again." "Mom." Everyone laughed the whole thing off. Brian joined in the laughter, but only because he didn't want to bring the mood down for everyone. Somewhere near midnight, the TV switched to a news story about an incident that happened in their town. The reporters spoke from their newsroom about a family of 4 dying in their home due to a gas leak. Though he didn't reveal their names or the location of the home, it felt like some sort of omen, but his family didn't seem to pay too much attention to it. Brian was about to ask his mother to double-check the gas again when the grandfather clock struck midnight with a deafening chime. The moment it did, all the lights in the house went out. Thinking that there was something wrong with the power, Brian pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight function. With the light illuminating the contents of the plate in his hand, he dropped it with a scream and stood up from his seat. Instead of the succulent turkey leg and wing he'd been happily snacking on for the past hour, a half-eaten dead rat lay on his plate. In his panic, he turned the light towards the couch where his family sat and immediately wished he hadn't. His family was still there, but they were no longer the lively people he knew. Sitting on the couch were 4 decaying corpses that might have once been his family. The empty black eye sockets stared into his soul as their putrefied lips curled into sinister grins that revealed their rotting yellow teeth and the maggots wriggling in their gums. Brian's mother, or what was left of her, uttered the last words he would ever hear with a foul breath that smelled like death itself. "We've been waiting for you for so long." It was a rainy Thanksgiving. We have a small family, so our family gatherings are tiny. It was my mom, my 2 sisters, our grandparents, and I for dinner at my mom's house. My older sister Nancy has been moved out for years. My younger sister Jamie and I still live at home with our mom. Our grandparents live 20 minutes away. Our dad's side of the family all live in a different town. We were all helping out with cooking and such, and our grandma was bringing over some food as well. We always do Thanksgiving dinner at 6 o'clock sharp. Our grandparents arrived at like 5 o'clock. We had to go out and help them walk through the rain up the front stoop to make sure they didn't slip. It was really bad out. Once they were here, we put the football game on in the living room, and I sat with my grandparents and watched football with my grandpa, who was a big Cowboys fan. My sisters were in the kitchen helping my mom with the food. The rainstorm created for a more comfortable and relaxing Thanksgiving evening. That is, at first. When it was time to set the table, I went to help. We were all at the table by 6 o'clock as per the usual. We had a giant selection of food for the small amount of people we were: turkey, leg of lamb, potatoes, stuffing, corn, cranberry sauce, cornbread, and more food I'm probably forgetting. We were all at the table eating, drinking wine, and talking before we migrated to the living room where we all watched the football game. Then, sometime before the game ended, the doorbell rang. It was still pouring outside, and we weren't expecting anyone else. Our mom said, "Oh no, what if that's your father?" Long story short, our parents don't speak, but the idea of our father coming to surprise us wasn't impossible. My mom told me to go check who it was, so I went to the door and yelled through it, "Who is it?" But the sound of the pouring rain on the front awning drowned out the sound of a male's voice on the other side. So I opened the door with the storm door still closed and locked. There was a black man on the other side of the door. He was in some really big rain jacket with the hood up. When I opened the door, he walked closer and yelled something through the door. I had to ask him to repeat it twice before I understood him to be asking for food, saying he's hungry. Then he said something along the lines of, "The Lord will give you good karma if you spare some food." I said, "1 second." I went to the living room and told my mom there's a possible homeless or just very hungry man asking for food at the front door. My mom said, "Close the door," while my grandma said, "Give him some food." I said I'll make a little paper plate of food for him from the leftovers. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bunch of paper plates to account for the rain outside ruining them, and then sandwiched some of the leftovers together with them. Then I went to the front door where the guy was still standing. I held up the plate to show him, and he tried opening the door. I yelled, "Wait, it's locked," but I already was wary now after he tried opening the door. Regrettably, I still unlocked the door, and the second I started to push it open, he pulled it open with force and tried pushing his way through me. I instantly threw the food and held him back, yelling for my sisters to come help me. As Nancy came to help shut the door, I saw 2 more guys rushing up the front walkway to the door. I managed to push the man out enough to clear the door, and I helped my sister slam it shut. The second it was locked, I ran to the backyard door to make sure it was locked. I was the only able-bodied man in the house, and I felt like it was on me to protect the house. My family was in hysterics as we were brainstorming what to do. Not so shockingly, we settled for calling the police. My mom called while I kept going from window to window looking outside. It was hard to see out through the pouring rain, but through the backyard window, I saw a couple of men running through the grass to the back door. I'd imagine they tried opening the back door and failed, and then I saw them running through the grass again back to the gate. Then they were gone. When the police got here, the food that I dropped onto the front stoop was still just sitting there all scattered on the porch. Not that it wasn't obvious that those guys didn't come for the food, but it's something worth mentioning. Our Thanksgiving was almost turned into a complete nightmare if it weren't for my and my sister's quick reactions. I know my grandma had her heart in the right place wanting to help the seemingly needy, and I was influenced by her, but unfortunately, we live in a world where sometimes trying to do the right thing could bite you in the ass. We installed the doorbell camera soon after. Walmart attracts the weirdest people. It was Black Friday, meaning me and my brothers were going video game shopping. Our first and only stop was Walmart. The place was absolutely mobbed, and being Walmart, it was mobbed with the wrong kinds of people, gross, weird, and just creepy people everywhere trying to save a few bucks on already cheap products. We rode the escalators upstairs to the video game section. I was looking for the latest Call of Duty game personally, but my brothers were looking for some other game I don't remember. Then out of nowhere, some creepy heavy oldish man who smelled like vomit walked up to me and said, "You like video games, huh?" "Yeah," I said. I began to slowly slide away, just to show that I wasn't interested in conversation. "My son likes video games too. Maybe you should come over and play some with him. He really craves company." The man gave me a creepy smile. "Oh, no, I'm not from around town, sorry," that's all I could think of saying. I didn't even give him a chance to keep this conversation going. Hell, I wasn't obligated to stand there and talk to this guy. I simply gave him a smile and called my brother's name out while walking away just to seem distracted. I did a quick backward glance. He was just staring at me as I walked away. I made it to the next aisle over and immediately felt comfort in being next to my brothers. I waited around until they finally found their game, and we headed over to the checkout counters. The lines were insane. I knew it would probably take 10 to 15 minutes just to make it to the counters, so I took that opportunity to check out some of the jeans and t-shirt sales. At one point, I found myself in probably the most secluded corner of the store checking out some t-shirts when someone grabbed my arm hard. I thought it was my brother messing with me, so I turned around and told him to go off, but it wasn't him. It was the man. I started calling for help, screaming that I didn't know this man. Some people came over and stared, but that was about it. The man let go and walked away. I don't know what he was thinking or planning on trying in a public place. I didn't tell my brothers what happened out of embarrassment, but they picked up on the fact that I was quiet afterward. "It's nothing," I kept telling them. We got into my brother's Camaro, and when I sat down, I looked to the entrance of the Walmart. There he was, sitting on the bench facing me. As we were leaving the lot, we had to pass right in front of the store. I got one last look at the creepy man. His head moved ever so slightly to constantly face me, even through the car window at night. I gave him the finger, but it didn't seem to influence him in the slightest. That was the last I ever saw of him. Walmart attracts the weirdest people. It was Thanksgiving. I had half the family over, along with the next-door neighbors, Tom and his wife. They don't have a big family, so they used to come over to watch the game with us on Thanksgiving. After eating dinner, we all sat in the living room to watch football, except for my daughters Tracy and Michelle, who aren't into football. At the time, Michelle was only 13 years old and Tracy was 16. During halftime, I decided to go up to Michelle's room to get her to come down. She finally budged and came down to the living room. Me, Tom, and a few in-laws went outside to smoke. Tom and I talked about his son, Sam, who had apparently gone back home to be alone and watch movies. He had been with us earlier. Tom joked that he was probably just watching porn, though I laughed. I stared up at one of the windows to my house, the window to Michelle's room. There was someone looking out the window. What the hell is Michelle doing back in her room? I thought. But then I realized that wasn't Michelle. In fact, I didn't know who the hell that was. I excused myself from the group and stormed back inside and upstairs to Michelle's room. Michelle followed after she saw me enter her room. "Did someone just come in here?" I asked. "No, why?" I looked around the room. It was completely empty. I nudged Michelle to go back downstairs while I turned off the lamp. We went back to the living room, where the game would be starting up momentarily. I finally decided to ask everyone if anyone had been in Michelle's room, near her window. Everyone either said no or shook their heads no. Someone had to be lying. I heard a slight thud come from upstairs in Michelle's room. I ran back upstairs again, with Michelle following me. I flicked on the lights in her room and spun around in a circle, looking for someone. The sliding closet door was cracked open. I just realized I thought I could see something through the crack. I squinted my eyes to try and see what it was. It was an eye. I screamed like a child for maybe 2 seconds. followed by Michelle. Relatives ran up into the room as I angrily slid open the closet and pulled out Sam, Tom's son. Tom ran up and found me basically holding Sam by the neck. Sam was holding some belongings followed by Michelle. Relatives ran up into the room as I angrily slid open the closet and pulled out Sam, Tom's son. Tom ran up and found me basically holding Sam by the neck. Sam was holding some belongings of my daughter that I'd rather not talk about. This incident definitely scarred, maybe even ruined, my friendship with Tom and his wife, and it's made me that much more protective over my daughter. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.